Welcome to the NintenFusion podcast, a podcast that fuses past, present, and future Nintendo thought. I'm David, accompanied by my friend Jordan.
This week we're going retro with one of our favorite games, Banjo Kazooie.
Yay! I love Banjo Kazooie a lot, and I know Jordan does too. Obviously, it's one of our favorites.
I am a huge Banjo fan.
It's so good, and we'll get into exactly why we love it. But the reason that we're bringing this up now has to do a lot with the fact that Nintendo doesn't really have any news going on for them right now. I mean, technically, I guess we got an announcement of some new Mario Kart tracks this morning, but since it's not out yet, we'll talk about that at a later date. And Xenoblade Chronicles 3 launches, I guess, tonight as of this recording, but that's on our docket for the next episode. So to kind of fill in the space, we figured it would be a good idea to talk about Banjo. Isn't that right, Jordan?
Yeah. We wanted to do some retro game. We decided to do something on the Nintendo Switch Online, so that way it's something that a lot of our viewers have access to at the moment. And we decided to go with one of our favorites, which is Banjo.
Banjo's so good. Jordan, when was the first time that you played Banjo? Do you remember?
Yeah, I was quite young. So I originally got an N64 with Ocarina of Time way back in the day. So it would have been a bit after that. I don't know when Banjo came out. Was it like, was Banjo before Ocarina of Time? Because Ocarina of Time was 98.
It was released in 1998.
Okay, so it would have been around that same year. So it would have been a bit after that because I did get it used. I never got games new as a kid. I always got them cheaper used. And it didn't take very long back in the day, I remember, for games to show up in like the $5 bin at Game Crazy. So, but yeah, just picked it up on a whim. It had a bear on it. Seemed interesting. That was about all the knowledge I had going into the game.
That's a nifty looking bear and bird. That sounds cool.
Yeah. And immediately just fell in love. It's just Banjo reminds me of point and click adventures without being a point and click adventure. I feel like it is obviously a 3D platformer, but it's not as heavy into the 3D platforming elements like, say, Mario is. And it's more in the adventure side and has a lot of like puzzle mechanics and like story bits or whatever, and the humor that you'd expect out of a point and click adventure game.
Right. There's a ton of dialogue, and pretty much anything that you can interact with in the game talks to you. Like, it has its own unique little voice sound that it has. A lot of these weird objects that you deal with have eyeballs, and they'll actually interact with you somewhat and talk to you. And it's honestly just incredibly charming. And you're right, it is very much like those old point and click adventures.
So phenomenal game. That was pretty much where I started playing. I actually played Banjo before Super Mario 64. And because of that, Banjo had always kind of like tainted Mario 64 for me, because I never understood why in Mario 64 it kicked you out of the level every time you got a star. I just wanted to keep exploring in the world like Banjo Kazooie allowed you to do.
Yeah, and see, it's kind of the opposite experience for me. We never really had a Nintendo 64 when I was growing up. I had access to an N64 up at my grandparents' cabin in the mountains. We kind of left the family N64 up there as like we're on vacation so we can play these video games, and also so your cousins have access to it. It was interesting, but it was also really fun. Spent a lot of really early mornings sneaking out of my bed to go play Mario 64 and such. But anyway, since I didn't have the N64 myself, I didn't really have the option to add games to the collection, because going up to our cabin was like a 2 or 3 or 4 times a year event. So I didn't get to play Banjo until much later, though I did play Banjo quite a bit at some of my friends' houses while I was growing up as well. Pretty much everybody but me and my friend group had a Nintendo 64, or one of the other guys had a Sega. But anyway, I remember being in love with the art style and design of the game. It just always felt so charming and lovely, and I just always wanted to play it. Like, it was kind of weird when I finally got my hands on my own copy of the game when I was finally in college and had my own Nintendo 64 because I had my own money. I just kept like thinking back on those old memories, and I'm like, yeah, no, the vibe is still here. And so I had a little bit more of an experienced gamer palette playing Banjo by myself for the first time, which was honestly, I don't know, it was definitely different from being a kid playing through the whole thing. But going from Mario 64 as my first 3D platformer to Banjo Kazooie, I was like, oh, this game is an upgrade in like almost every single way because you get to collect the jiggies and stay in the world and whatnot. So, I mean, I totally get where you're coming from, but at least I don't view Mario 64 as like a downgrade. I just saw that as the first step.
Well, and to Mario's credit, they finally caught up to Banjo with Mario Odyssey. Just shots fired.
It took what, 20 years?
But no, I would say Mario's strength is the platforming. Mario is better at being a platformer than Banjo is. The platforming itself is pretty rough in Banjo. The main draw to Banjo is basically the dialogue, the witty writing, the adventure, the exploration. It's, like I said earlier, more of a point and click adventure game than a true 3D platformer like Mario is. Right. Where Mario is all about like these really well designed kind of linear level structures with most Mario games. There are, of course, a bunch where they open things up a bit more. But whereas Banjo's just go out, figure out what jiggies you can get or find, and then just move on if you can't find what you need to the next level.
Yeah. And one of the other really strong parts of Banjo is the fact that Banjo and Kazooie's kit of like moves and abilities grows throughout the game. You know, which in a lot of ways, the simplicity of Mario 64 was like, oh, every jump that Mario has, he just does permanently. The only thing that you really unlock in that game beyond the extra worlds and whatnot are the different caps. But the caps are like temporary abilities, whereas with Banjo, every time you get an upgrade, it's like a permanent upgrade to Banjo's kit, which can make like going back to earlier levels after you like are at the end game, basically, like honestly really enjoyable because you can beat enemies in different ways and whatnot. So in that way, Banjo really is like an evolving adventure where you gain new things, you get to try out new things, and everything like fits together really well in Banjo's kit.
Yeah. I will say having an evolving like kit of moves is both good and bad. There's like obviously downsides and upsides to it. Mario having just your starting kit allows you to master those moves a lot more. And so like Mario 64 does have a really good movement options. I don't want to like diss down on Mario 64. It's just as a kid where I wasn't like really as focused on like the 3D platforming element quite yet. Banjo just gravitated more towards me at the time.
Right. Most kids, I imagine, when they play Mario 64 for the first time, at least for our generation, Mario 64 in the early hours of the game is like exploring outside the castle or exploring inside the castle or exploring Bomb Battlefield without doing any of the crazy hard platforming or battling sections. When it comes to Banjo, sure, you get Spiral Mountain as a starting place, but then it also like it's such an open world that you can go and play around and have like a fun time in the first world while making progress in the game rather than just jumping around with Mario's moves and whatnot outside the castle or something. So I think that both games do a phenomenal job of like introducing the player to the different mechanics and whatnot. I mean, Banjo has like a whole little kind of side story thing where you can talk to bottles to unlock your very first set of moves, or you can skip it in Spiral Mountain to collect all of the honeycomb pieces so you can move on if you want. And Mario just kind of throws you right in and is like, here's a fun little playground where you can climb up trees, you can jump over all sorts of things, you can even learn how to swim right off the bat. And I think that both have done a great job in that regard anyway.
Yeah, both are stellar games.
Yes, absolutely.
So, but yeah, Banjo, just I love the openness of it. And at the time, I feel like that was kind of the most like exploratory design space for like 3D games, because we just left 2D gaming with the PlayStation. And things were starting to open up a lot more with the N64, with games like Ocarina of Time and now Banjo, and Mario 64 was like really early on the N64 library and created the engine for Banjo and Zelda to be able to do what they did. So
Right, right.
But there was of course was a lot of like open world elements to Mario 64. It's just Banjo kind of opened things up a lot more in terms of just pure adventure, go wherever you want aspect.
I agree with that for sure. Yeah, and with Banjo and Mario, like you could pick and choose what you wanted to collect. I mean, Banjo, you do need to have like certain numbers of things to end up beating the game. Same with Mario. Mario requires a total of 70 stars in order to beat the game, and Banjo requires I don't know how many jiggies you need. That's not a number that I have memorized because it's it's not like the game tells you how many total jiggies you need, like Mario does. But anyway, it just always felt like in Banjo, I could collect maybe, I don't know, 60 of the notes and maybe 4 or 5 jiggies and then just call it good on the level. But then like Mario, I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with this.
Entire worlds in Mario.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
The level design in Banjo, it's all Banjo Kazooie is part of the collectathon subgenre of 3D platformers. It's kind of the grandfather of that subgenre, where you have other games like the Banjo series. Ukulele is pretty recent. Would you classify Hat in Time in there?
I think so.
I think so.
Especially if you're considering the collectathon genre as like a subset of 3D platforming.
Right.
Because Hat in Time is very much a 3D platformer and has a lot more 3D platforming than most collectathons, but there are definitely a lot of collectibles in Hat in Time.
Yeah, and then also Donkey Kong 64.
Yes.
It kind of became what Rare was known for in their last few years with Nintendo.
And we really like the collectathon genre, like if that's not obvious.
And one of the things that kind of sets Banjo Kazooie off from the rest of the collectathon is the levels in Banjo Kazooie are a lot smaller than most collectathons are. I don't know if you noticed that, but
they are very
Banjo
small.
Tooie is enormous compared to Banjo Kazooie. Ukulele is astronomical in size. Donkey Kong 64 is huge. And so because of that, a lot of people like Banjo Kazooie the most because like they want to be collecting things. They want like this open world, but they don't want to get like lost or have like this huge swath of time where they're walking from destination to destination. They want it to kind of feel like an amusement park, like they're exploring Disneyland or something, not exploring the whole world.
Right. In Banjo, the first game, I believe there's only 1 or 2 instances, maybe 2, where you actually have to leave the level and you cannot collect something unless you take advantage of the Furnace Fun Moves exploit that speedrunners take advantage of. You need like an ability where it's like an upgrade to the Talon Trot where you can get some shoes to run really fast. That's one that you absolutely need in Freeze Easy Peak, but you don't get that ability until one of the later levels. So in that regard, like, yeah, Banjo, you have to come back. But it's not like running back and forth between levels like more than 4 or 5 times.
Right. The levels are a lot more self-contained. Also, completing an entire level, if you know where everything is, just takes like 10 minutes or so. They're really not that large of worlds in retrospect, especially compared to like Banjo Tooie, which is enormous. And I like it. I like the simplicity of the level designs for that. And it does feel like an amusement park where basically when you enter a world, you see like 5 or 6 main attraction areas to go visit. Yeah, that's a great way to put it. There are definitely gigantic landmarks in every single world. Which is and they're not very far apart from each other. It really does feel like an amusement park. Whenever you enter a level. And all of those landmarks have the ability where you don't even need a map to know where you are in the level, right? Like the one that I think has some of the most predominant visual landmarks is Gobi's Valley, the desert level. Yeah, like you've got the gigantic pyramid, you have the Sphinx, you have like the sand pits, you have the starting oasis. Like all of those are just huge visual indicators of where you are. And I never felt like I was lost in that level at all. Yeah. There are some levels that are not quite up to speed with the rest of the levels. Rusty Bucket Bay is that was the exact one I was about to say. For not being very good. Well, and Rusty Bucket Bay is incredibly punishing because you have the
breath meter, even if you're at the surface of water, which is obnoxious.
Oh man, I was thinking of like the rotating puzzles like
the rotating puzzles are bad too, but they
didn't design that with like the physics of Banjo Kazooie in mind.
No, they didn't. Especially inside the stinking engine room, where if you fall, you lose all of your progress in the level except for the jiggies you caught.
Well, there was also a bunch of times, I believe, at the N64 version, they didn't like manipulate where some of those spinning bars would stop at. Sometimes they would like stop with like a bit of an angle, and that would just immediately push you into a slide. And if I remember right, the 360 version, they touched up on that, so it does it is predictable on like whether or not it like stops on a flat side or not.
Well, that's good.
And it's a lot more visually like indicative, like when it's completely flat, because it's flat or it's like a complete like triangle or so.
That makes sense. I'm glad they did that, because it is really rough in that place when you're playing on the N64 version.
Yeah. So talking about like the different like versions of Banjo. So we recently played through Banjo Kazooie on the Nintendo Switch Online with the expansion pass, because there's a whole bunch of N64 games on there. Banjo Kazooie, thankfully, being one of them. When the N64 was being rumored for the Nintendo Switch, it was really open-ended, like, will Rare get games on there? Because you can't really represent the N64 properly without Rareware. It's basically like half the identity of the N64.
Yeah, you've got Banjo, you've got Donkey Kong, you've got GoldenEye, you've got Perfect Dark. I mean,
Conkers.
Conkers. It's
Diddy Kong
there are
Racing.
A lot of good games on there from Rare.
And so we did get Banjo. I think that's the only Rare game currently on there.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. Yes.
And there are rumors that we're getting a 007 something soon, but it sounds like it's not going to be the Nintendo Switch Online. It's going to be like a standalone release.
If they're remaking that game, I don't see a need to put the N64 version on. Only because I know legally 007 is very difficult as a property.
And they wouldn't put Perfect Dark on there because it's rated M. But
no. Same with Conkers.
I would love to see Diddy Kong Racing show up.
Diddy Kong Racing needs to be on there. Yes.
Yeah. Because the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pass is pretty heavily focused on like online multiplayer. Diddy Kong Racing and Banjo Tooie are two games I really want to see added to the service. In my opinion, Banjo Tooie's multiplayer is like criminally under like represented or anything. It's just like, it's one of the best party multiplayer games you can get for the N64.
Which is fascinating because that game is so big as an adventure. It kind of reminds me of how much fun I had with the Metroid Prime 2 multiplayer with friends, you know?
Oh, yeah.
Just like hidden gems of multiplayer baked into these gigantic adventures.
So it would be a lot of fun to be able to play some Banjo Tooie multiplayer with some of my friends across the country online. But anyway, so we played it on the Nintendo Switch. So we'll talk about how that compares with other versions. Of course, the other big versions being the N64, the original version. And then it was also released in the 360 because Microsoft ended up buying Banjo. And there's also the Rare Replay, but I haven't played Rare Replay. Have you?
No.
Curiosity?
I'm not really an Xbox person.
Yeah. And so the big thing to note is the Xbox 360 did make some quality of life feature updates, but also added a few glitches. So it's kind of like a mixed bag of whether or not it's a better version.
Yeah.
Now, with the N64 on Nintendo Switch, one of the things, the first thing that comes to my mind whenever it's like, oh, let's play an N64 game on the Nintendo Switch is how bad are the controls going to be?
Yeah, that's the hardest thing.
Nintendo hasn't really fixed this issue yet still, right?
Right.
Am I wrong? Have they added mapability?
No, they haven't, which is the most frustrating part because honestly, I don't mean to jump into like criticisms right off the bat. Like I had a good time with the the Nintendo Switch Online version. It's a very fun way to play Banjo, especially if you don't have access to an N64 and you don't have Xbox. Like, play it there. It's actually really good. The problem is that so many of Banjo and Kazooie's moves are mapped to the C buttons on the N64 controller. So either you have to use the right stick or you have to remember which of the buttons are actually mapped to the X, Y, and like ZR button or something. And it drives me nuts because like one of Banjo's moves, one of those C buttons isn't mapped to any of the physical buttons. So you have to use the stick anyway. And I'm just like, ugh. I took a little break from the game, like a couple of days, and I could not remember which one was C down so that I could get into Talon Trot fast. And so I just went back to using the stick for all of Banjo's moves.
I will say, so I'm pretty used to using like the second joystick for C stick stuff because I've played so much Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask on the GameCube, and it's pretty similar in that regard.
Right. I have too.
I will say, by pure coincidence, they mapped the best button for Banjo to the, let me double check with the controller, to the Y button. So the Talon Trot is the Y button, which is like, if you were to have a run button, that's the perfect spot where you'd want it to be.
Yes, I agree. But I kept pushing X for no good reason because I just kept forgetting.
Yeah. So the only thing they could have done better is if X was mapped to like your shooting the egg ability, but it wasn't.
I never found myself touching the X button.
So if I had the ability to map, honestly, the only changes I would have made was map shooting egg to X and then map R to ZR because I don't like having my two trigger buttons be at different levels.
Right. I can agree with that for sure. But I don't know why Nintendo hasn't fixed the mapping. It drives me crazy because Ocarina of Time is kind of the same way. If you want to play Ocarina of Time on the N64 NSO, you have to use the C stick to get every button. Like,
yeah,
whatever.
So I think it's playable. I think it's fine. One nice feature about the Nintendo Switch version over the N64 version is that you can create save states and load save states and all that. And that's nice with Banjo Kazooie because in the very first game, they had the bright idea of making it so you lose note progression when you die or leave a level. So making save states so that, and I think you can also like reverse time. I didn't end up using that feature.
I actually didn't even use the save state feature when I played.
Really?
Yeah, I should have, but I also didn't die, so it's okay.
So I'd say that's like the one downside to original N64 version, because the Xbox 360 version, one of the quality of life features they made is that you just don't lose note progression.
So that the notes were actually permanently collected?
Yeah, you permanently collect notes in the 360 version of the game. That's
so good because they did that in Tui as well. So that Rare definitely was like, whoops, that was a bad call.
Kind of a weird design choice because it seemed like they wanted notes to be viewed as a form of like scorekeeping, but like that's not a good metric for like a score. Like it was kind of like an arcadey view of the levels. And since like obviously you're moving from 2D game design to 3D game design, you're going to have some of these weird like design choices that slip in, and that's just the one that Banjo got.
Right. I mean, the notes are kind of like coins in Mario 64, except Mario 64 always has more than 100 coins. Although I think like one of the levels has like 101 coins or something.
Yeah, but like the difference is that notes are tied to the progression of the game.
Exactly.
Whereas coins are not.
And Mario kept kicking you out of the level every time you collected a star. So if you didn't get 100 coins, but you wanted to get the 100 coin star, you could just go back in and they were everywhere and easy to collect. Yeah. But Banjo's like, yeah, no, if you die, you have to collect them all again. And they're always in like, I don't know. When it comes to Mario 64, the coins are in fairly obvious spots. You can kill enemies to get a couple of them. But the notes in Banjo Kazooie are usually placed like on the way to Jiggies or other things, which are permanent. So if you've collected the Jiggies and you die, you lose all of those notes, but you still have to go back to the areas where you've collected all of the Jiggies and whatnot. So
yeah, so then you're like,
weird.
Yeah, I don't like it because, like you said, then you lose that kind of like that trail of where to find the next Jiggy or whatever. Because the trail's back again. Like, someone returned your breadcrumbs. Even if you've collected all 100 notes as well. So
yeah, exactly.
That has always been one of my major gripes of Banjo, that and Rusty Bucket Bay.
I love the song in Rusty Bucket Bay. I think it's like a good jam, but the level design is just, I hate it.
And on top of that, so like I've been playing a lot of Dark Souls lately. And if you've played Dark Souls, you know, like the Snake Fortress it also has like these spinning like traps like Rusty Bucket Bay, and they're just as bad as Rusty Bucket Bay. So every time I'm playing through that dungeon in Dark Souls, I'm always listening to the Rusty Bucket Bay music, because at least then I can have a little bit of fun.
That's awesome. Anyway, I did have a question, Jordan. Did you notice any like input lag or anything on the NSO? Because I didn't.
Nope.
It felt really good, which was weird.
Has there been lag reported?
There's been lag for Ocarina of Time. So I just wanted to know if there was like any experience for you with Banjo, because I do feel the lag in Ocarina of Time, but I don't in Banjo.
Okay.
Though I think that a recent patch somewhat fixed the Ocarina of Time lag. But anyway, I also remember when Banjo came out on NSO, I actually pulled up one of my favorite speedrunners that I've been following for years for Banjo Kazooie, and he was playing through it on the NSO, and he's like, this game feels almost exactly like the N64 game, just with weird control mappings. So that's a really good sign for people that are interested in playing the game. Yeah. If speedrunners are like, this feels almost lagless, then you know that the average person is definitely not going to feel anything. So anyway, the controls also felt fine on NSO, but man, playing through Banjo again myself, like Banjo feels so slippery sometimes, and it's really hard to position him when you want to do precise jumps after you stop. Yeah. So like the platforming aspect of Banjo is not the best. But the whole game is designed around that in mind, so it's not that big of a deal. Right. A lot of the platforms are very big and it's very forgiving. But they're like, even in Treasure Trove Cove, that's so hard to say fast. In TTC, when you have to like do the backflip jump into the chests that have all the spikes, like trying to get Banjo lined up for one of those jumps in the right place was so hard for me for some reason the first couple of times. I kept getting too close or too far away. You have to have a little bit of a gap between you and the treasure box. Right. But Banjo is like slippery enough that it was hard to get him into the place I wanted him to be in. But it's okay. Again, this was Rare's first real foray into 3D games. So there are those hiccups. But again, the game is really designed around a lot of that. So I think it's pretty forgiving, except for Rusty Bucket Bay in the engine room. Yeah, Rusty Bucket Bay. Oh, man. Oh, that level. And then they also had like, oh man, the worst part about Rusty Bucket Bay is after you've done all this like platforming through the awful spinning traps and all that, and you finally get out, then you have like this time puzzle where you have to like swim through the oil fields and get to the other side of the boat and get 100%ing the game. That is like the worst part. Yeah. Yeah. It's so hard. And even some speedrunners have struggled with it in the past. There are definitely routes now that make it way better. But I remember years ago, like Rusty Bucket Bay was often a run ender, not just for the engine room, but for like drowning because they mistimed something. So don't feel too bad if you're playing it for the first time and struggle. Also, this is never explained in game, but you can control Banjo better while swimming while holding down the R button. Wait, really? I have never known that. You've never known that? That's what I get for watching speedruns of it, baby. They're like, this is never explained in game, but for some reason, Banjo doesn't make as sharp of turns and is way smoother if you hold down the R button while you're swimming, at least in the underwater portions. I've had a lot of people or friends complain about the water level parts. My roommate, I tried to get to play the game and he quit because on Clinker's Cavern, specifically because of swimming, which honestly, I don't think swimming's that bad. I think people complain a bit too much about it. Yeah, I agree with that. I don't know if that's just me being used to it at this point, but you press B when you're going fast in a straight line and A for like
more precise controls.
Yeah, exactly.
You just have to alternate, but everyone seems to just be like, no, I got to go fast all the time and hold B and just go. And it's just, all right, you're going to have some hard turns there, but
stop thinking like a speedrunner. You can use the other buttons. It's fine if it's your first playthrough. But anyway, beyond that, from the control standpoint, I think Banjo is just like a really fantastically made game. It's so fun. The atmosphere is so charming. The music is one of the highlights of the game for me. Like every single time, I can't help but hum along in like every level. Do you have a favorite song from the game, Jordan?
Rusty Bucket Bay.
Yeah, Rusty Bucket Bay. It's so
honestly. Spiral Mountain's also really high up there.
Spiral Mountain's also really good. I mean, I have a hard time when it comes to just saying something's a favorite. I love every song in this game a lot. But I guess one that kind of edges out over the rest is Click Clock Woods. I love that jam, especially when it goes into like the B section where it's like beam bum bum ba dum ba dum be don't be don't be don't be don't be don't ba da 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 da. Like I love the syncopation there, and coming from a drumline background, it gets me grooving every time.
Well, and also it changes depending on what season is. Like Click Clock Woods was a really fun idea for a level. Where basically you do an interaction in like one season and it like changes the map in the other season. And you kind of just see kind of like this story progression of different actions that you take and how it affects the rest of the world.
Yeah, it's really well done. It's probably my favorite level in general to play through, except when you fall off of the top of the tree. Then it's the worst level in the game.
Yeah, you do get a bit old climbing that tree over and over again.
Yes, especially if you fall and lose all of your note progress.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Geez, my favorite level, though, might be either Monster Mansion or Gobi Desert.
Oh, those are both so good, too. I think Mad Monster Mansion is probably the best themed level in the game. Like, it's just everything feels like the spooky mansion, right? Especially with the cathedral, or the chapel, I guess. And then Gobi's Valley is just good, too.
That's also the area where there's the potted plant that says crass words.
I promise it's not saying the F word. I promise. Like, I remember that in an interview and everyone's like, yeah, sure. You at least definitely edited it and cut it so it sounded like it if you didn't. Like, come on.
So he went on an interview lately that said it's not true, right? The F.
Yeah, it's supposed to be thank you.
Okay. And this was Grant, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah. What the heck, man? Because he literally went on Game Grumps and was the one that like spread that rumor in the first place. So he said it both ways now. Yeah.
It's so funny, though. But I love the level design in these games. They're so fun, honestly. I don't think there's ever like a dull moment in Banjo except for Rusty Bucket Bay, which is stressful.
Well, the best part about like Banjo is that you don't have to play it. You can skip the level.
Yeah. If you're tired of it and you're not going for 100%, just go on to the next place as long as you have enough notes. It's all good. Well, enough notes and jiggies. But honestly, if you like get all the jiggies in like the first 3 levels, then you kind of have a good enough buffer where just getting like 3 or 4 jiggies from the next few levels is plenty.
Yeah.
That is so good. I guess I also really enjoy the theming of Freeze Easy Peak. I kind of want to put that out there. I think we didn't really talk about that. Also, Bubba Goomp Swamp is also good. Oh, man.
Most levels are really good in Banjo Kazooie. In fact, I would say all of them are except for Rusty Bucket Bay.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Are there 10 or 9 levels? I believe there's 9.
Yeah, because I think there's a total of 100 jiggies and 10 of them are lair jiggies.
Yeah, so there's 9 levels. So 8 out of 9, that's pretty good track record.
I agree. Yeah, it looks like we've got Spiral Mountain, Gruntilda's Lair. Those are both like the overworldy areas. We've got Mumbo's Mountain, Treasure Trove Cove, Clinker's Cavern, Bubblegoop Swamp, Freeze Easy Peak, Gobi's Valley, Mad Monster Mansion, Rusty Bucket Bay, and Click Clock Wood.
Yeah, so we kind of covered all of them.
Yeah, They're all pretty good. One other part of the game that I guess is worth mentioning is how unique the Furnace Fun game is as like your final test of the game.
I thought that was the most brilliant thing ever when I was a kid. I was laughing so hard, but I know that there are some people who really despise that part of the game.
It's rough. I mean, I can totally understand that. I mean, I remember the first time I played through it, I definitely failed like 4 or 5 times. And
it's hard.
It is really rough. Remembering the names of different characters that you found before, recognizing the voices of characters, remembering the names of the levels based on pictures that it shows you, the challenges that it gives you, like to fight the bosses / mini bosses inside all of the levels again. And then, of course, like the hardest part, which is the grunty questions, which you have to go talk to her sister scattered throughout the lair to get the right answers for.
Yeah, that part is a bit mean. I understand where they were coming from, and it's nice. They basically wanted to force you to have to talk to her sister every playthrough, right? So they randomize it. I think it would have been a bit better if they were static answers, right? And you just you learn about Grunty as a character effectively that way. Whereas this way, it's like I don't even talk to her anymore. I just go and guess.
One thing that a lot of people do is they talk to her once, and there's like a tool online where you can enter in the 3 answers that she gives you the first time, and it'll figure out what the rest of them are for you. So that way you don't have to guess and potentially lose your life if you fail. So, but I think it was a really fun idea, but it definitely would be cooler to get more information about Grunty as a character rather than like her favorite type of sock is this, or she loves to eat this weird thing. It's like, okay.
Like you could have gone up to her and then she like says like a backstory, like snippet of Grunty or something. And then in that you're supposed to like parse out what the answers to questions would be, where it'd be like maybe 2 or 3 paragraphs or something.
I think that'd be good. It would add a lot more depth to the game, though. I mean, Banjo isn't known for having super heavy lore. So
yeah.
Though I guess with the Banjo Tooie, they do expand on a lot of things in like the game's lore, I guess. Grunty is a way more involved character in the plot.
Yeah. Yeah. Banjo Tooie definitely tries to expand a lot more and is a lot more, I don't know, story focused. There's a lot more story to Banjo Tooie than there is with Banjo Kazooie, where Banjo Kazooie is just like an evil witch kidnaps your sister for an evil spell. Woo, will you go stop her? Yeah.
That's it. But Tooie it's much more involved. Like
we get character deaths in Tooie.
Yeah. But anyway, and then the final Grunty fight is honestly, I think, a pretty good final boss fight, especially for like the N64.
Yeah. There is a bit of a difficulty spike with the fight, though.
Oh, yeah. No, it's hard. But it ends in one of the best ways possible. Like if you've played Smash Brothers, you've seen the final attack. If you've seen Banjo's final smash, that's basically how you beat Grunty in the very end.
Jinjonator.
Jinjo! The Jinjos are funny too, because then they get a huge like increase in usage in Banjo Tooie. Like there's a whole village and different types of Jinjos, and they can all actually talk. But anyway, we're not here to really talk about Tooie. I'm trying to think, Jordan, is there anything else that we missed about the base game? We talked about how it works on NSO, a lot of our experiences. I'm just trying to think if there's anything else we want to say about it in general.
Well, what would you rate it? So a rating for Banjo in general and a rating for the Nintendo Switch experience.
Okay, so if I were to review this game, comparing it only to the games that it was competing with, I'd give it like probably a 9.5 out of 10. So like if my only game experience was like Mario 64 and Banjo for the 3D platforming genre, like it's amazing. And I think it's a 9.5 out of 10. Comparing it to like games of today's standards, you know, it probably gets knocked down to an 8.5, if only because of the like kind of wonkiness from the controls. But like everything that's charming about the game definitely brings it up in my mind. You can kind of take from that what you will. Like maybe nowadays I'd give it that 8.5 out of 10 just because it's starting to show its age, but it's still a fantastic game and I don't want people to think that I don't like it. When it comes to NSO, I think it's the best N64 game on the NSO right now. From a control standpoint, from a lagless standpoint, from even a visual standpoint, I think it looks really good on the Switch for some reason. So, I mean, I'd probably give it like, I don't know, that 8.5 might be raised up to maybe a 9 just in comparison to the N64, but I don't know. It's hard for me to rate such an older game.
Yeah. I will say, so when I was a kid, like Banjo Kazooie was one of my favorite games of all time. It was absolutely phenomenal. Back on the N64 era, I definitely would have given it a 10.
Yeah, yeah.
With this recent playthrough, I am noticing its age a lot more.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not as nostalgia blind as I used to be back in the day. I would say like an 8's fine. You do have to give it a bit of leeway because of its age, right?
Right.
You do have to be like, well, it like at the time, like a lot of the stuff that it's having issues with, everyone was having issues with. So I think an 8 is fine. I could definitely see some people not gravitating as much to it though now. N64 is really rough with like trying to like get new people to go back and play. I would say as far as retro consoles go, Super NES is probably the easiest to get people to go back and play. And then basically the older you get is difficult. The N64 obviously is newer than the SNES, but SNES being 16-bit, like there's a lot of games now that are just like imitating SNES, and it's enjoyable. Like it's not even just nostalgic, it's just there's a certain style to it, and that kind of is lost with N64, where it's a lot harder to be nostalgic for what was like the N64 visual look and controls. The N64 was very revolutionary, but the cost of being revolutionary is it's kind of aging.
Yeah.
It's hard to go back to.
I guess you could say we should be somewhat grateful that the N64 library isn't as big as other Nintendo console libraries are, I guess. I don't know if it's 100% true, but I always felt like the N64 first party library was honestly smaller than like the GameCube or even the SNES.
Yeah.
So,
well, it's so hard to make a game for the N64.
Yeah, yeah. And the transition to 3D meant that a lot of Nintendo's properties wouldn't get a 3D game until the GameCube. So, I mean, you've got Metroid, for example. We had Earthbound, that was supposed to come out on the N64, but that development was so bonkers that they scrapped the N64 version and started basically from scratch for the Game Boy Advance because it was so hard to make it work. So, yeah, I totally agree with you. Going back to the N64 is definitely something hard to get people to do if they never played N64 games before and don't have the affinity for it. Which is honestly why I think that a lot of the N64 games could really benefit from like a real remake. Ocarina of Time 3D is probably my favorite way to play Ocarina of Time, but I wish it wasn't on my 3DS. Same with like Majora's Mask.
That really needs to be ported over. Okay, so with Majora's Mask, I still prefer the original over
I prefer the original Majora's Mask because the changes that they made on the 3DS, I do not agree with. But anyway.
And like one of the nice things about the 360 version of Banjo is that they increased the draw distance for items with a collectathon. That's massive, right? Like,
yes.
Being able to see notes from very far away definitely helps a lot. And I am a little disappointed that they weren't able to do something similar with the NSO. Like the NSO this is just the N64 version.
It's literally like they ripped the ROM from the cartridge and just played it on the emulator. There are no improvements at all.
Aside from like the save state stuff that you didn't even use.
Right. And I guess the internal resolution is higher. It's not trying to render the game at what? Yeah.
And the frame rate feels more stable too.
Yeah, I agree with that.
How Banjo compares to like more recent collectathons. Hat in Time's really good.
Yes, it is.
I think Hat in Time is a more enjoyable experience now than the original Banjos. I think we can safely say that.
I think that's very fair to say.
And then, of course, Odyssey is Odyssey. It's the latest, like, God-given gift. So,
I mean, Odyssey is one of Nintendo's best games in the last 10 years, period. Like
nothing can compare to Odyssey. And if Odyssey is considered a collectathon now, which of course it is, it's the best collectathon ever made.
Yep.
Bowser's Fury is another recent collectathon. And it's not quite as good as Odyssey, but it's still a solid experience. So we're getting some really, really strong collectathons again. During 2017, it was crazy because we got Yooka-Laylee, Hat in Time, and Odyssey all in the same year. And so it was like, oh, is this the return of collectathons? And no, we have the only one we've gotten since then was Bowser's Fury.
Well, at least from a big studio. I imagine there are some indie studios that have done stuff, but
yeah. So collectathons, when we get them, they're really good. Yooka-Laylee is more of the spiritual successor. It's made by ex-Rare employees. And I personally really like Yooka-Laylee, but I seem to be in the minority of that.
Yeah.
And I think a large part of that is because Yooka-Laylee is it's a spiritual successor to a fault with Banjo. Not only is it not like as robust in its like platforming mechanics as Mario and Hat in Time are, but also it followed the same like trajectory that the Banjo games were going, to the point where like a lot of people were kind of iffy with the direction that Rareware was going at the time, where every world was getting bigger and bigger. Donkey Kong, let's be real, Donkey Kong 64 is Banjo 3.
It is, and it is too big.
It is too big. Yeah. So like Banjo-Tooie is bigger than Banjo-Kazooie. Donkey Kong 64 is bigger than Banjo-Tooie. And now Yooka-Laylee is even bigger than Donkey Kong 64. And so you could get lost and you lose that like theme park attraction feel to the level design.
Yes. Especially with Yooka-Laylee being able to like expand the levels. Like it starts off pretty small and is kind of nice. Like I was like, oh yeah, I kind of like how small things are here. And then it's like, no, but there's a lot more collectibles that are locked behind you needing to expand the world. And I was like, oh, okay. And that's kind of where the game lost me, is it was too big. I mean, I agree with you. I think it's better than people give it credit for, but that was my disconnect. So,
yeah. So I would love to see another Yooka-Laylee. I would die for a Hat in Time 2. Yakuza Metro is one of the best 3D platforming experiences I've ever seen. But aside from like one of those, and of course Mario eventually coming out of his slumber again, there are rumors that we might see more Banjo soon. So
yeah.
There's always rumors. This is a really popular rumor topic, mostly because there's a lot of people who really want to see Banjo return. And it's really iffy on how Banjo would do, because it's not as like platforms focused as Mario or Hat in Time. And if you are to do it, Yooka-Laylee was kind of not a great sign for how well a new Banjo would be.
Right. The pure collectathon.
Yeah. So if you do a Banjo 3, please focus on small amusement park style levels and worlds, and focus heavily on the dialogue, because it's going to be hard to get Banjo to have the platforming aspect be a major draw for it. So you need to focus more on the strengths of the series and not try to be that you're not what you're not.
Right. Don't try to Breath of the Wild the game. You know, so many games are like trying to make huge open worlds on all of their IPs, where it works sometimes, but it feels like if you really refined the playstyle and genre and world type that you're known for, you'd have an amazing experience. You know, that's one of the reasons why I'm kind of skeptical of Sonic Frontiers is you take Sonic and make it this big open world. I don't think Banjo would do very well in an open world like that at all.
Well, it is open world. It's just that you don't want it to be like these massive sprawling worlds.
Well,
right?
yeah, that's like, what I mean. Yeah.
People seem to get really tired out of collectathons when you don't have. So a lot of people say like when the world's too big, but I don't think it's that the world's too big is the problem, because Mario Odyssey has some massive worlds. It's that if the scale of the world outstrips your movement options, I think is the issue.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So we're getting a bunch of rumors right now because like Phil Spencer got an achievement recently for Banjo Kazooie with like Jiggy Got or something. And so people think that he's doing one of his clues in plain sight, which he's done before. Like he's literally put an Xbox Series X on his shelf in the background of videos and laughed when people didn't catch it. So you have to like be on your toes with Phil. We've also heard like in the past, like 2 or so years ago that Double Fine might be doing something Banjo related, but Double Fine has come out and said that they're not doing a new Banjo, but people are still clinging on to maybe they're just lying. And then on top of that, Modern Vintage Gamer has recently said that he's heard that there's a Banjo project in the works at the moment. He doesn't know if it's like a Banjo 3 or a Banjo remake. I think, honestly, it's better to go with a remake just to kind of see how Banjo would work in like modern times than it is to go for a Banjo 3.
Right. I totally agree with that. We've talked about this before when it comes to like the Metroid Prime series, where we're really excited for Prime 4 and we think it's going to be amazing. But the team at Retro Studios has been so far removed from the game that we are really hoping that Metroid Prime is getting a remake. And it works really well for a game like Banjo to do that exact same thing. If they make a remake, they can learn what made the level design so good. They can focus in on all of these things and use a character that has an enormous history in the minds of, you know, like the gaming community, especially among Nintendo fans. Like, I don't know if you remember, Jordan, how many different videos of different live streamers and even people gathered in like physical locations watching the Nintendo Direct where they announced Banjo and Smash Brothers. Like, I think that Banjo still has an online presence and would do incredibly well. But I do think they need to start with a remake of Banjo 1E, Banjo Kazooie.
Yeah. If you do something Banjo, you have to hit it out of the park. Like it has to hit the ground running. I don't think we can have another nuts and bolts situation.
And Nuts and Bolts was in 2008. So
it's so long ago. Man, it felt so bad when Microsoft bought Rareware and then sat on everything until Nuts and Bolts. That's what we ended up getting.
Oh, I know. And then there was, of course, like, I mean, I don't know how much of a fight it was, and I'm sure a lot of Nintendo fans were like, Nintendo definitely fought Microsoft for all of the rights for the Donkey Kong stuff that Rare made because it took so long for Donkey Kong to get a lot of its characters that Rare developed back. I mean, we still haven't seen K. Rool in a Donkey Kong game since.
I don't know how much I buy that because K. Rool's in Sluggers. I think it was just that the teams that were making Donkey Kong games just wanted to do their own thing.
I agree with that.
They viewed the country games as Rare's thing and they wanted to do their own thing. And I don't think they understood just how much people really like K. Rool. Probably until K. Rool showed up in Smash Bros, honestly.
Yeah. And they're like, wait a minute, people like this? And it's so funny because Banjo's reveal for Smash Brothers literally followed the same format as K. Rool's reveal because it's like, yeah, these are both Rare characters making their comeback, which is so cool. It was so good. Those two trailers were so hype for Smash Brothers. Man,
Smash Ultimate had some really big character reveals.
For sure.
I'm still kind of in disbelief that we got Banjo at all
for
in
real.
Smash Brothers. That felt like a long shot character, and he definitely made it in because of the ballot. Like,
oh yeah, didn't Sakurai say that he was on the ballot or something? Or am I misremembering?
I'm sure there was a big push for Banjo on the ballot because people asked Phil, like, can Banjo possibly make it into Smash? And he said, I'd love to see Banjo in Smash, and everyone lost their minds. And so I think most of the roster of at least the base roster and probably the first wave of DLC minus Joker were characters from the ballot.
Plus Sora. We know that Sora was number one on the ballot.
Yeah. And the only reason why Joker, I excluded Joker is because he didn't exist by the time the ballot came around.
Yeah, exactly. And Joker basically made it in because the Persona series has like Sakurai's favorite non-Nintendo series. So
I guess on that list, Incineroar and Isabelle, I don't think would have been too high on the ballot. Incineroar just straight up wouldn't exist. But
yeah, but those were like safe bets, you know. Incineroar, a new Pokemon from one of the more recent generations, and he's a fighter. And Isabelle, we need one more representation from Animal Crossing. So it works, but they weren't ballot characters for sure. Anyway, somehow we transformed our discussion on just Banjo into Smash Brothers, but that just goes to show you how important Banjo is, I think. Like seeing him come back in Smash Brothers probably, and the reaction that fans gave Banjo returning and showing up in Smash Brothers might be one of the reasons why these rumors about a Banjo remake or new project really feel real this time, especially from all of these sources.
I could see after like Microsoft saw the reactions for Banjo, like before releasing or giving him to Nintendo for Smash Brothers, they probably just thought, oh, this would be like a fun thing for the fans. Like it's just fans just want some fanfare. And then they just saw just like how much fans like lost it that we actually got Banjo. They're like, oh, we might have been sitting on this potential gold mine for quite some time.
For way too long. It's like the only reason that we weren't happy with Nuts and Bolts isn't because it was a Banjo game. Like Nuts and Bolts just wasn't that great of a game to begin with, in my opinion anyway.
And I think Nuts and Bolts really soured Microsoft's like view of Banjo.
For sure.
And I wouldn't be surprised if Banjo didn't do too well on the arcade for the 360. Just because the people who really want to play Banjo are on the Nintendo system.
Yep, absolutely.
And so if they make a Banjo game, I know there's going to be some pushback within Microsoft, but they really need to make it multi-plat. I feel like they need it to be on the Switch, Xbox, and PC.
They absolutely do. And I don't think there's anything that can stop them from publishing it on the Switch as long as they pay Nintendo the royalties for publishing or whatever.
Like, and they've done it. It's just that while everyone keeps talking about, oh, Microsoft has been releasing all these projects on the Switch, most of them I don't think were like internal Microsoft games, right? They were mostly studios that Microsoft purchased that were already doing projects for Nintendo, and so then they released, or they kept to their contract, right? They finished the project.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Except for Ori. I think Ori's the big one, where it just Ori and Minecraft. So I guess if Ori and Minecraft are there, then yeah, like why not bring Banjo over? It just makes sense, like from a marketing standpoint, for Banjo to be on the Switch. Right.
I mean, he's on Smash Brothers, so clearly all of the people that were super hyped about Banjo being in Smash have a Switch. There's no guarantee that they have an Xbox or a PC that they can play the game on.
And even though I'm like saying, oh, Microsoft make sure to put it on Switch, I personally would be playing it on Windows. So it's not like I'm like doing a beg for it to be on my preferred platform or anything. I'm still playing on a Microsoft platform. It's just it makes sense. Like Banjo's main base is on Nintendo.
Absolutely. It'd be hard for me to pick which one it would go on, which one I would play on, because I do have a PC and I have a Switch.
Well, it would be on Game Pass is the thing, right? So
true.
It's hard to like not choose Game Pass whenever it's an option.
Right, because if you're already paying for Game Pass, you might as well play it there. Anyway, though I guess if the Banjo rumor is true, I would rather it wait for the Switch 2 so that it looks better and runs better.
Yeah. And on that side, like it would be portable on the Switch. So that would be a draw for a lot of people
for sure.
Play it on the Switch.
For sure.
And like I've been saying, I have a Steam Deck and I love playing games portably on that. You can't really play Game Pass games very effectively yet on the Steam Deck, so I'd still probably play it on Switch over that. You can do it. It's not a great experience.
Yeah. Well, anyway, Banjo is a great game, and if you have never played it before and you're interested, you should definitely give it a shot.
Of the N64 games, I think it is one of the like go-to must-play games. I still think Star Fox 64 is the N64 game that has like aged the best.
Yes, I do agree with that.
And it had the advantage of being a rail shooter, so it didn't have as many opportunities to age up as much as other games.
Right.
But I would say Banjo Kazooie is definitely in the top 10 best N64 games to go play if you're curious about that platform.
I agree. I totally agree with that. Oh man, I just love Banjo. Sorry, I just have like some of the Banjo soundtrack stuck in my head now. I love Click Clock
The
Woods.
music is so good in Banjo.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah, Grant Kirkhope did a really good job, and that was kind of the game where he kind of like kicked off stardom.
Yeah, because he didn't write the music for the Donkey Kong Country games.
Yeah,
like
that was David Wise.
Banjo was like really his foray into video game music, and he did such an amazing job that everyone just loves him. And he's doing Mario and Rabbids stuff, so go play that game, I guess, if you want to get another feel for his music.
He also did a track for Hat in Time.
Oh, did he? That's awesome.
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
I think he did the hub theme for the spaceship.
That's really cool. That's so cool. Anyway, I don't know if there's anything else to say about Banjo. We've given our reviews. We're hoping that they'll give us a remake. I mean, we'd be happy with a 3E, but the remake seems like the better choice. And you should definitely go play it on NSO, especially if you have the expansion pass. It's just sitting there for you. Anything else you wanted to bring up, Jordan?
No, I think we covered it.
Cool. Well, thanks for listening to us ramble on about Banjo Kazooie for about an hour. It's kind of fun. I don't think we've talked about Banjo that long in a very long time. But if you enjoyed listening to this episode of the podcast, please consider leaving us a review on the podcast app that you're using, or leave us a comment and a like on YouTube. Doing those kinds of things tells the algorithm that people like our show, and it will start recommending it to others, so it helps us out a ton. You can also come talk about Banjo with us on our Discord server. Head to nintenfusion.com/Discord or click on the link in the episode notes or description. With all that said, thanks again for listening to this episode of the NintenFusion podcast, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye-bye.
See ya.